This podcast is brought to you by Rise Make Life Workout, a health and self-development platform dedicated to helping busy, everyday Kiwis manage their physical health and upskill their mental well-being.
Through sharing relatable and practical content from health practitioners, as well as showcasing interesting stories from interesting people.
For more shows, content, events, and coaching, head to our website, www.rise-workout.com. How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to the High Frequency Club podcast. My name is Marwin Salerio.
And I'm Sinead Bierman. We're here talking all things self-development, growth and mindset.
We have got the most high-level athlete we've ever had on the High Frequency Club podcast today. Olympian, Commonwealth silver medalist, retired hammer thrower, Julia Ratcliffe. The things that surprised me the most wasn't about the hard work it obviously takes to get to such a high level in her sport, but the relationship with her father, who was her coach over her entire career, which spanned over 2 decades, as well as the work that she did with a psychologist around identity, values, and motivation.
Yeah, Julia shares some of the most challenging aspects of being a high-performing athlete, and also what that transition process was like for her and her father when she retired.
Is Julia making a comeback in professional sports? You'd be surprised, but not as an athlete. Instead, through the High Impact Athletes organization, which she will share in this episode.
Let us know your thoughts once you've had a listen, and be sure to subscribe and follow along at the High Frequency Club on all your favorite audio platforms, as well as Instagram and YouTube.
Enjoy the show. So yeah, Olympian, silver medalist in the Commonwealth. You know, that's a huge achievement to be representing our country on the biggest of stages. For people who need reminding on who you are, Julia, can you please introduce yourself? What got you into hammer throwing and what you do now?
Yeah, cool. So my name's Julia Ratcliffe. I am a retired hammer thrower. I picked up the hammer throw when I was 11 or 12. My dad was my coach my whole career, so he was the one that got me into it. He was a PE teacher back in his day, and kind of was like, you're going to be good at sports, we just have to figure out which one. And so we tried all the athletics events, and landed on the hammer throw. But did for nearly 20 years in athletics. Managed to represent New Zealand a number of times, went over to 3 Commonwealth Games, competed in the Tokyo Olympics, and did 3 World Champs as well. So
wow.
It's been a big career, and retired about 18 months ago. And just had kind of done everything I wanted to do, and it was time to put it down and pursue other things. The professional side of me is that I studied economics and have been trying to develop a career in economics and finance, and so I worked at the Reserve Bank of New Zealand for 5 years towards the end of my athletics career, and have since moved to the New Zealand Super Fund, so that's more into the finance space and investing. So been working at the Super Fund for just over a year now. And really enjoy that, and that's kind of like a big part of my life as well. So
I really look forward to talking about that change, that transition from athletics to where you are now. And now that I know you're in economics, looking forward to talking about the recession. No. Your dad was your coach.
Yeah.
Trippy. All your life.
Yep.
Interesting. Can you describe the relationship with your father throughout that whole?
For sure. So we're pretty tight. As a kid, it kind of felt a bit more like he was driving it, and he was like, I don't know, as a kid I was pretty trusting. I was just like, parents know best, and he was kind of saying there's a lot of opportunities that you could have through sport, and I have had incredible opportunities through sport, so a journey I would relive all over again for sure. But he is like quite an obsessive man, so he's like really good at research, goes real deep into stuff, and just a really smart man. So we didn't know much about the hammer throw. I think he'd done it once or twice as a masters athlete for fun back in his heyday, but it was something that we kind of learnt together, mostly off the back of me not being very good at any of the other athletics events. So.
Did you have siblings?
An older sister. She did athletics as well for most of her high school years, but then she kind of took off overseas and followed a bit of a different path. So.
Oh wow! Yeah. So your father competed too?
Not to massively high level, but he just loves sports. And when he was doing his, he did his like PE teaching diploma after his university degree, and I think that kind of really fostered his love of sport and athletics, and he grew up in the UK and did his study over there, and then moved to New Zealand as a PE teacher, and ended up in Taranaki area, in Hawera of all places, and that was like a massive athletics hub in the 70s, and so that was just all of his interests in one, and so he did a lot of athletics coaching of high school students, so kind of developed those coaching skills, and then met Mum and moved to Hamilton, and we came along, and he was like, oh great, got some new athletes to train up, so here I am.
Wow.
Yeah, that's crazy that he didn't obviously know much about hammer throwing and like had to learn it just as much as you would have been.
Oh, very
as
much
well.
so, yeah.
That's
He
crazy.
bought a hammer off the internet and was like, I got you a present, and I was like, oh cool. Dad's like not a gift giver, like this is awesome, and I was like, what the heck is that? And he's just like, get in the car, and I was like, okay, here we go. So it's like the footwork and the technique is so technical and so not like anything any other sport does, and so it's kind of like reading coaching books, getting on YouTube, just kind of figuring it out as we go. Like he used to email and send video off to like the top coaches around the world, and just kind of learning by figuring it out as we go.
Yeah, wow.
Can you describe what hammer throwing is for people who don't know what it is, because otherwise people might think it's an actual tool building tool.
It's not. I got that a lot all through high school. So it's like a shot put, but it's got a swivel in it, and so it's got a piece of basically number 8 wire with a triangle handle on the top. So you swing it around your head, spin around in ballerina circles, and let it go out of the cage. So it's thrown out of a cage like a discus is, but it's on a wire. I don't know if you've seen Matilda.
Oh,
the movie.
Been a long time.
Miss Trunchbull, when she like grabs the girl by the pigtails and does that. She was a hammer thrower back in her day in the movie. So Miss Trunchbull.
Was there any sports that you really enjoyed before hammer throwing?
Yeah, so I played hockey all through high school to rep level, and a bit of netball. I just love sports, and it's funny, I ended up in a individual sport because I love team sports, love team culture, and like pinging off other people. So you definitely have a lot more control over the inputs and outputs of your individual sport, but in terms of the social and enjoyment aspect, like the team sports is what I love. So
what was it like with going back to your dad being your coach? Did you guys have like clear boundaries on, okay, I've got my coach hat on, my daughter hat on, my athlete hat on? No. Absolutely
not. When I say dad's obsessive, he's obsessive. So like he's just thinking about it all the time, which is what you need to be great, honestly. And I probably didn't have that passion for the hammer necessarily. My strengths were kind of my ability to follow a plan, like kind of stubbornly almost, and just kind of that determination and discipline of like just following a plan and being able to do that, but Dad was the one that was kind of like just froth the technique and like all the big athletes in the field. And it's quite funny because you see kids coming through and they're like, I want to be like Valerie Adams, I want to be like Zoe Hobbs, and I didn't really have a sporting idol necessarily. I was just like, this is just something Dad and I do, and we'll just see how far we can go, I guess. And there wasn't really anyone throwing the hammer to a high level in New Zealand at that time as when I was coming through. So my competition, I used to go down to Porritt Stadium in Hamilton every week, and my competition were 2 masters athletes who were kind of in their late 70s, early 80s, Marion and Bruce, married couple. And they were my competition, and we'd just go out and throw every Saturday at like this club meet in Hamilton. And so it was very much me against me, my whole career up until kind of I started competing on the world stage, and went over to the States for university for 4 years, so competing overseas as well. So that was kind of the point at which it became like I had to take a bit more ownership of what was happening and my motivation and stuff, because when I was living with Dad, he was like, well, we're doing this, and I was like, well, okay, like quite compliant, just was like, yeah, it's all right, good a thing as any to be doing, I guess. But Dad couldn't switch off. I have this crack up picture of me. It's like a Snapchat to a friend or something. And it's just like, I love it when I'm like in bed. It's like bedtime and Dad's coming. I'm trying to go to sleep, and he's like flicks the light on. He's like, you just got to be more connected to the hammer. And I'm like, can we not do this now? And it's like this whole argument spins off because I'm like, just boundaries, and he's like, but hammer throw.
Yeah.
So that was pretty funny. Like looking back in the time, it was less good, but
that must have its advantages though.
Oh, absolutely.
You were just exposed to the hammer and the talk about it and whatnot.
Yeah, exactly. So
what was that like for your mother?
Oh, honestly, like, her and my sister have been just absolute saints through the whole thing. Like, it's something that Dad and I chose to do, but they didn't choose to do it, and they still got kind of dragged along for the ride and impacted in terms of how we spent our family holidays. And like, Dad was kind of like, we can't go there, there's no throwing circle, we can't train. And so it was quite a big impact on the family in terms of how we spent our time and kind of family resources. So very, very grateful to them for their support. And Mum was always so good, because I went through this whole thing, we might get into this a bit later, but like, I'd come home and be like, oh man, I've got to go to training, or like, oh, this is terrible. And she's like, no one's forcing you to do it. Like, no one's got a gun to your head saying you must throw the hammer. Like, no one dies if you don't throw well. This is like, you should be grateful to be doing this. This is a privilege, and if like, no one's going to stop you from stopping. Like, it's on you. And I was like, oh, I have to do it. Like, I can't let Dad down. She's like, no, you can. Like, you can. So she was very much, and in the moment, again, I didn't really appreciate it for what it was. I was kind of like, why can't you just get on my level? But in terms of like, you know, providing that perspective of like, bro, no one's forcing you to do this. That kept me grounded. I know a lot of athletes lose sight of that sometimes, so it was very very useful to have that around, have that forced on me.
I wonder if that was like a strategy with your mum and dad, you know?
Oh no, definitely not. I think Dad would have been like, yeah, come on, like, we have to do this. This is like a must. Whereas Mum was like, okay, you know, is this are you choosing this? Like, make sure it's a choice. So yeah, bringing that choice back into it definitely like put me in a happier place over my career. So.
Yeah, right, because you felt like it was forced? You had to...
it just kind of felt like a burden, and like, again, it was just, I felt like the choice had been taken away, but it hadn't. I was still choosing to do it. I could have stopped at any time. But yeah, it was just like bringing that gratitude back to it, and being like, oh, I'm very lucky to be able to do this, actually. I'm very lucky to have the support of my family, a great coach, great dad. So, yeah.
So when you went to the US, you go.
And I was going to say that that tends to be a theme with athletes when they do start to lose their joy, is when it feels forced upon them, or more of a chore than they're doing it for enjoyment, and naturally for some as well results with that as well. Like, if they're not enjoying what they're doing, the outcome's usually not there either.
Yeah, exactly. Huge thing for athletes as well. And a lot of the time, if an athlete is in a better space in their life, in terms of life setup, that might be they have a job that brings them a bit of joy outside, or study, or they move to a better flat or a better living environment, or they're training with people that they enjoy spending more time with. Like, even if they do less training, they might often do better because they're enjoying it. It's like, just that mental side of things is so important for performance and for how your body reacts to the training that you're doing. And so, yeah, that's huge lessons over the years.
Is that the, you know, in the same realm of that saying, when your passion turns into your job, it can start to, you know, be a negative effect?
Yeah, for sure. And for me, that was always, I needed balance in my life. Like, I always needed to be studying or working. I just needed something else outside of sport, because I just, you know, it'll just get so boring for me to be doing that. But some athletes, that's their dream, is to just not have any other pressures on them, just be able to eat, sleep, train, and they'd love to do that. But, you know, I saw some of my friends that didn't have other things outside of training, and they'd have a bad training and they'd just sit on the couch and think about it until the next training. And I was like, oh no, that's not for me. And so I always needed something else to just kind of keep me a bit mentally occupied outside of training. And again, that was something that Dad and I battled over a little bit, because he was like, well, you know, if you weren't doing that, you'd have a bit more energy, and you'd probably be able to train more, and you'd be able to throw further. And I was like, yeah, but I probably wouldn't be very happy. And that might impact my performance more than being able to do a bit of training would. So yeah, it was kind of a to and fro. And, you know, I don't know who was right. Like, I kind of, over time, as I got older especially, like, I was just doing less training, because I was like, you know, I just get bored. Like, especially like, I love going to the gym. I'll keep going to the gym all day, but just the technical training of hammer, it was so just repetitive, and because you're just like trying to fine tune the same thing over the years more and more. So it just got very repetitive.
So when you went to the US for 4 years, is that when you made that next level switch that, hey, I'm going to do this even harder, I'm going to double down on it?
Like, yes and no. So for me, that was kind of, I had to switch that motivation to more intrinsic. Then I wake up and Dad's like, well, you ready? Should we go to training?
Didn't go to
so he didn't go. So he kept coaching me through that time. but I was training with the team, and I had the coaches over there because there was always like an assigned coach. But when I was recruited to the university, Dad said, hey, she can come, but I want to keep training her technically. So the coach was like, sweet, because they have 60 odd athletes to keep across. So they were like, sweet, an athlete that's going to train herself, nice. And the coaches can have quite a bit of churn in the US, so explaining that relationship to new coaches coming through, like a lot of them had a lot of grace and patience with me as I was like, hey, I'm not going to do your training. Sorry, I'm going to do my dad's training. Again, which worked and didn't work over the years, is like uni got quite busy, picked up a few injuries as I got a bit older, and probably had like less good management of myself as I was just picking up more stuff and academic stress. But I was filming most of my throwing sessions and sending them home to Dad, and he'd give me feedback overnight because there was a time difference, get feedback, go out and try and fix it the next day. And we made quite a bit of progress, but then had a few setbacks and stuff that we might not have had otherwise if I was in New Zealand with him a bit closer. But I'd do that all over again because it was such an awesome experience outside of throwing.
Yeah. At what point where you guys are like, the Olympics is right there?
Oh, it's a good question. So I was trying to qualify for Rio in 2016. So I did 3 years of university, and then I came back to New Zealand. I took a year off, which in my head was like, oh my gosh, like I'm not going to graduate the same year as my friends. Like it was quite socially hard for me to go home and leave like such an awesome community that I had built. But I did it, and I kind of in my head had like thrown everything into it. But I think I was still doing it from a place of like, oh, I've got to do this. Like this is something I have to do, as opposed to something I want to do. And so was training full time, living with mum and dad in Hamilton, and I got 25 centimetres away from the qualifying standard. So that's that much. Didn't make it. And so I had to go back to the US and be like, well, didn't make it, like, cool. And it just felt like this wasted year because I hadn't really failed at much of my life up to that stage. Like I hadn't, had big enough goals, obviously, that I was like failing at them. And so that was probably the first big failure that I came across that was I had to process and had to be like, you gave it everything and that wasn't good enough. Where in the past I had that had been good enough to achieve what I'd wanted to quite a high level, but not for the Olympics. So it took me probably like another year and a half to process that and kind of get back to a decent place of, like you do want to do this, you're lucky to do this, and that entailed kind of just coming with kind of a crappy attitude back to training and being like, well, gave it everything, guess I'm not good enough, well, I'm just going to keep training because that's what I do, but my head wasn't really in it, and so ended up getting injured and picking up a few different injuries that I didn't manage very well, so it was kind of like when my mind wouldn't give out, my body did because it was like, you don't want to be here, like you're not doing it from a good place, why are you still doing it? And I was like, because Dad said I have to. But like, I could have quit at any time. He still would have loved me. He's my dad. But it was quite funny that like the body falls apart when the mind refuses to sometimes. So kind of had to manage to graduate from university and then come back to New Zealand and spent probably 6 months like massively dialed back training, had to have some serious physio work and really adjust training, and which we hadn't ever had to do before, and Dad hates adjusting training. He's like, well, just train through, you can either train or you can't train, there's no adjusting training.
No load management.
Basically. And again, that's something we've learned over time as well, but it was that was quite hard for both of us to be like, oh well, I'm allowed to do half speed throws today, and I was like, why are we doing this at all? So that was probably a really good time as well to be like, hey, this has actually nearly been taken away from you because you're too sore to throw. And then it was like, well, now I can't throw, now I really want to. So so that was kind of like a good switch around of having to go back and think about like, do you want this, because it's going to be quite a bit of rehab work. And I was like, yeah, okay, no, I actually do now. Now that the option of it being taken away is there. So managed to come back from that injury, and that was coming into the 2018 Commonwealth Games in Gold Coast. And it got to the point where I didn't know if I was going to qualify for the team. I hadn't had a competition because I hadn't really been throwing. And so I finally managed to get a few throwing sessions under my belt. put together a competition and managed to hit the qualifier at my first competition. And I was like, how good is this? And was just all of a sudden just stoked to be there, as opposed to being like, oh, I've made the team now, like now all these expectations. It was, oh, how good, I get to go, like I get to have fun with my mates, I get to represent my country, and went into that competition with so much more gratitude than I had for any other, and didn't care about the results, was like, I'm just chuffed to be here. You know, there was a good chance that I wasn't going to be here, and now I can just go out and just see what happens. And that was the one that I won. Awesome. which is cool, and that was like another part of my career. My kind of MO of competing has been not necessarily like the best PB of the field, but I can hold it together when everyone else kind of crumbles a little bit. So especially in like bad weather conditions, or something goes wrong, like I don't know, it might be a postponement or something because of the weather, or just something goes a bit wrong, I'm kind of like, oh well, you know, I can still throw a hammer, whereas some other competitors struggle a bit with that. So in the Gold Coast, we had torrential rain, and my sister's sitting watching it in London, going to her colleagues, she's going to win it. She's from Hamilton. She trains in the rain all the time, but I know girls that would just not do a throwing session outside if it was raining. So we'd done a lot of adversity training.
Yeah, I was about to say, does that come down to your adaptability?
Yeah, definitely. And the fact that, unless it was kind of dangerously raining or like thundering, because I'm holding like a metal implement, it's kind of like, as long as I could still see and like my glove wasn't too slippery, then I'd get out there and throw. And so that gave me so much confidence that like whatever was thrown at me, I could still go and get the job done. And it might not be to like 100%, but like as in terms of percentage of my max versus percentage of what other people are doing of their max, like I could always kind of be a bit higher. So yeah.
So was that the competition you won and you're like, Olympics, let's go?
Yeah, yeah. So it's a long story, it's just my life story, isn't it?
No, it's good.
Yeah, so I did 2018 Commonwealth Games, and I guess so I had missed Rio.
Yeah.
2 years later, did the Commonwealth Games, and was thinking at this stage, so I'd finished uni, and so it was kind of like, what else am I going to do in my spare time when I'm not training? Because like I still really wanted to go to the Olympics, and especially having missed Rio, I was like, I don't fail. That's not what I do. So I was like, I got to go and do it. So I was thinking about that, and so ended up taking a graduate position down at the Reserve Bank of New Zealand, and I said to them, like, your program on the website says it's 2 years, can I give you 18 months and then go home and I'll come back, but like I want to go to the Olympics, and I knew at that stage I needed to put a few things down so I could focus on it, and I was really happy to do that this time around, as opposed to being like, oh, I'm missing out on so much other stuff. I was like, I know that I have to do that much training, and I know that I have to be in a good mental place of wanting to put all that resource into it, but knowing it was only for a short time, and so they were happy with that, which was cool, and so I had heaps of support from my colleagues. It was awesome to be able to bring my kind of athletic self to work, and have that support, and I'm kind of coming in every morning being like, I'm so tired, and they're like, nice, like you got this, keep going. So they were really supportive, which was cool. But yeah, it just gave me something else outside of sport again to feel like, you know, if I had a bad training, I'd be like, well, I can go to work and have a really productive day and be part of a different team that I'm achieving something in, and contributing to, more importantly. So yeah.
You mentioned before you were 25 centimeters off the qualifying for Rio. And then you were 18 months off because of injuries, and you said you don't really fail. It's very rare that you fail. How did you deal with it? And how differently would you deal with it in the future?
I was really lucky that I, like in high performance, if you're a carded athlete in the system, you have
a what?
Sorry, a carded athlete. I don't know if they call it carding anymore, but like if you're a funded athlete or kind of like a program athlete.
Oh, okay.
So some get funding, some don't, depending on your results throughout the season. But you have access, if you're in the program, to a lot of support services. So physio, strength and conditioning, nutrition, all of that stuff. And I was super lucky to have access to a sports psychologist. And so I'd used a sports psychologist probably when I was about 18. I think the person that influenced me to go and seek out that resource was Sarah Walker. She was a BMXer, And she came and spoke at our school sports awards, and she won a medal, I think, at the London Olympics. And she came off the track all chuffed, and then her coach was like, you should have won that. And she's like, you just stuffed it in your head. Like, you just cooked yourself. You should have won it. Like, awesome, you got a medal, but like, if you think that's your best, you're kidding yourself. And so she sought out sports psychology as a way to kind of get on top of whatever was going on for her. And so I was like, yeah, you know, like, I think, like, I knew that Dad was a huge motivator for me, but I knew that going over to the US, and if I was going to pursue this to a higher level, I'd probably end up resenting him for it, because, you know, you're putting your body through hell trying to get there. And even though he was doing it from a place of love and support, like, if it feels forced and if it feels like it's not coming from you, like, it's almost impossible to do. Like, you can't push yourself to that level just for someone else. It has to be for you as well. So when I worked with a sports psychologist, and I genuinely can't remember actually like what we talked about, but I remember a lot of it was about that relationship with Dad, and how I was trying to come to terms with, like, it's actually okay for me to want it for myself, even if, like, my whole career so far had been him wanting me to do it. And so I don't know why I needed to come to terms with that, but apparently I did. So that was like a good thing. And then kind of on and off over my career, if I came across mental blocks or kind of getting nervous at competitions, things like that, like, the sports psych was kind of something I tapped into. But when I needed it most, when I kind of failed at the biggest thing I'd ever attempted, I was like, nah, I don't need that. Nah. And I, like, that's probably the thing that I would have, in retrospect, gone and dealt with, was just kind of like, just talk through that. And it probably wouldn't have taken much. Like, I can't imagine it would have taken more than me expressing how I was feeling and actually sitting with it for a while, but I didn't, and just went and kind of carried on life as if nothing had happened, when it had, like, a really big thing had happened to me in my head. And so going forward, I think after Commonwealth Games, or kind of in that 2018 period of injury and thinking about, like, what are my motivations again, and, like, do I really want to do this? Tapped into sports psychology quite heavily, and just kind of working through, like, what my motivations were, like, what my values were, all that kind of stuff, and how I wanted to, how sport was kind of an expression of who I was, and how I brought myself to the sport as opposed to other people's expectations. Or you just get stuck on this train of, like, you're an athlete, so naturally you want to be the best in the world. And I don't think that was ever my goal. I was kind of like, oh, I know what it takes to get there, and that looks quite hard. And probably for me, like, the satisfaction that would bring me, probably not worth it to like dedicate my life to something to be the best person at spinning around in circles in the world. Like, to me, that's like,
the bigger picture.
That doesn't motivate me. And so, kind of like figuring out my motivations, figuring out my goals, and kind of how those things aligned and could be used together to get to where I wanted to go. So, definitely very grateful to have had that access to sports psychology, because half the stuff you talk about isn't sports related at all. It's like we were talking about earlier, like, if you're a happy athlete, you're going to compete well. So, you know, break up with a boyfriend, or, you know, something's happening at work, or just whatever, like, just a place to get it off your chest and be like, okay, how do I put that down and focus on training again? Like, if I've had a bad day, how do I put all that down and dial into what I've got to go and do, because I've got a job to do now. So
wow, it's like compartmentalizing your experiences in your life. And emotionally regulating yourself.
Exactly, it's emotional regulation, absolutely huge. So, like, heaps of mindfulness stuff, and just like little tools to be able to emotionally regulate yourself, essentially, as fast as is healthy. So
when was the seed that got planted when you're like, I think I'm wrapping this up now?
Good question. I just really wanted to go to the Olympics. Like, that in sport, and especially in athletics, is like the pinnacle of a career, is going to the Olympics. Obviously getting a gold medal is the pinnacle, but you know, that's what you aim for. You don't always get there. So I was kind of like, I really want to go to the Olympics, and I was kind of feeling the drag already of, like, having missed the first one, going for a second one, and really wanted to retire after Tokyo, but ended up we got back from Tokyo, we did our 2 weeks MIQ, and during that MIQ, there was another lockdown in the country. And so we came out of MIQ into lockdown. So this huge thing that we should be celebrating with our friends and family, we're like, cool, you can go and celebrate with your bubble, because we couldn't do anything. And that was kind of the next 6 months or so. Was I had all these like kind of post-Olympic things I wanted to do and like heaps of plans, and I just couldn't because everything was so locked down still. And by that stage, what I threw in Tokyo had qualified me for the Birmingham Commonwealth Games, and so I was like, well, what's another 6 months? So I went and did the Birmingham Commonwealth Games, and the World Champs in Oregon, which were kind of back to back because of COVID postponements. So did another World Champs and another Commonwealth Games, and then was like, okay, I'm quite ready to put it down now. And kind of what we talked about earlier, about like what motivates you and how much you're willing to put into it versus what you get out of it. And I knew that I'd probably left such stuff on the table of kind of how far I could throw. Like I think I could have thrown further than what I'd put out in my best competition, but I knew what it would take to keep going and to get further. Like I'd have to double down again, and I was kind of like, I've doubled down a few times already now. Like I'm getting a bit tired, and like Dad would have kept going to the bitter end. Like he would have just kept going until I couldn't physically keep going, or he couldn't keep physically going. But kind of looking more holistically, like it was still an impact on my family. Even as my mum and sister, like even as we weren't living together and people were across the world, like it was still really impacted the family dynamic. It was like it was all about me. It was all the decisions were kind of made around how will this impact Julia's training, or like what are Julia's timelines, which isn't fair. Like it's families. I think the families of athletes don't get enough credit of like how much they adapt to support the success of one person in their family, or the support people of athletes, because it is a lot. It is a lot. You ask any partner of an athlete, like...
So you have been super aware of the trade-offs, not only that you had to make, but everyone else around you too.
Oh, only probably in the last couple of years of my career did it really hit home. And like I'm kind of embarrassed actually of like how long it took me to realise that, because I was like, you don't have to do the training, like what are you talking about? Like you go on holiday without us, what do you care? But it was like as I got older I was like, oh my gosh, like it's been about me like my entire life, or like my entire throwing career. Because I assume that's where the competitive edge of like a high level athlete comes from, right? It has to be about you. Yeah, it does, and it's a super selfish pursuit. And like a lot of athletes really struggle when they retire, that it's not about them anymore. And like in your head you know that, but like even the social license you get, and I've found this in particular, like of I was going to the gym like for an hour and a half before work to do my training and then go to work, but like other people do that. They might not have been training at the intensity that I was training at, but they still have to make time to do it. And here I am thinking that I'm special and I'm an athlete. And it was quite funny because like people, when you're training for something like the Olympics, you have so much more social license from the people around you, because they're like, Julie's training for the Olympics, like, oh, she needs to go to bed early. Like I'd kick people out of my, like I'd have people around for dinner, I'd be like, it's 9 o'clock, you have to leave now, like it's bedtime. And that was okay, but like now I try to kick my mates out, they're like, shut up.
You ain't got nowhere to be.
Exactly. So I was like, the social license that you had to be selfish is so much higher when you say, I'm trying to achieve this goal, which is awesome. Like people recognize that you're trying to make these trade-offs to achieve something. But I didn't quite realize how much social license I had until I chose to retire. So that was quite funny. And also on the retirement front, all these years I've had to say no to so many things, like weddings, friends' birthdays, like baby showers, all that stuff, just because I was in the wrong place, or it was going to be a late night, or I had an event the next day. And when I retired, I was like, I can just say yes to everything. And so I did for like a year, and it was a terrible idea.
Why is that?
I just did too much. I was just like so tired and so overcommitted, and I was like, I don't need to sleep, I'm not training anymore. I don't need to eat well, it's fine. But no, you do, to be a happy person, not just an athlete. And so that was a really rude awakening. I have to make time to exercise. It's not just given to me as this is my training time. So that was wild. But
what was it like for your father when it was time to retire for you, when you made the decision or you started to go through that transition?
Yeah, no, really good question.
What's his name?
His name's Dave.
Dave.
Everyone's like,
shout out to Dave.
Shout out to Dave. Everyone's like, is Dave okay? Dave loves mowing his lawns, and he loves cycling. So he goes on these big bike rides with his mates, which is cool. But yeah, people are like, is Dave okay? And I wasn't living with mum and dad at the time, so I didn't really see much of it. But I remember asking him, like, well, how are you coping? Like, how are you doing? Because, you've basically, I've retired you as a coach, essentially. Like,
you're unemployed now.
Sorry
it's
about
like, hurry up and have a child or something.
Yeah, basically. So that's been funny because, like, I did have to be like, hey, like, I still need you as my dad. Like, you might, and like for him, I think in my life, his whole purpose has been as my coach. And he's like, that for him as being a good dad is like, I've given so much to you as a daughter and as an athlete. Like he's just put so much work in and like dedicated so much of his life to this as well. And so, yeah, it's just like for him, I was like, I still need you. Like I made sure to tell him, like, I still need you as my dad. Like you still help me in other ways outside of sport. And I think for him, he was like, it took him a while to understand that, or to kind of come to terms with that. And I remember asking him, like, are you doing okay? He's like, yeah, I'm fine. What do you mean? And then a few days later I get a message, he's like, I do miss you a bit though, like I do miss hanging out. So yeah, I think miss hanging out with him, miss training, because we used to just spend an hour or two a day out in the paddock throwing. So
What was that process like when you had to tell him the first time?
I think we were sitting on a beach, it was after the Commonwealth Games, we were sitting on a beach because we actually finally managed to go on a family holiday. It was in like Albania or Greece or somewhere. We did like a couple of countries in Europe because we were already over there, and my sister and mum had come to watch as well. And I was like, hey, so like I'm definitely, like, I know I said after Tokyo, but like I'm definitely done now. And he was like, oh, okay, so what's next? And I was like, no, stop it. Stop it. And like he's real positive in that way of like he's always looking forward, and that's kind of how he moves through tough times is he's like, well, okay, well, that's cool, that's happened, we can process that, but what's next? And I had to be like, okay, but can we stop and like celebrate this huge thing that we've done together? And he's like, well, no, that's done, who cares? And so I was like, no, like I had to be really conscious to be like, hey, no, this is a huge transition for both of us. And I remember my retirement announcement, I think it was on like 2 news channels, like on the sports news, and people were calling him and congratulating him on such a good career, and I think he was really touched by that because he didn't quite realise how much of a big deal it was. And so yeah, I think it kind of hit home when that kind of I'd like publicly announced it and all that stuff. So that was, I think, for him a bit of like, we did some pretty cool things, eh? Like, but that was almost 4 or 5 months after the fact that I'd kind of told him that I was planning on retiring and kind of phasing out that training and stuff. So
did you find that you transitioned faster than your dad?
Probably, I don't know. I think we probably had different things to transition from. Like for him, it was probably, he used a lot of mental energy, planning, researching what competitions are we doing, what's the training plan going to look like, what's technique look like in the world these days. But for me, it was more like operational of like, where am I training? What training times do I have? What do I have to eat? When am I sleeping? All that stuff. And so for me, it was more like, what next physically for me? Because like I don't want to let myself go. I don't want to like, I wanted to do something physical still. And so I took up rugby, which was a really good way to stave off that post-retirement depression that they tell you about. Because like a lot of athletes get themselves in a massive hole after retiring because for them it's like their whole identity. And for me, it was quite funny. I was like, being a hammer thrower isn't my identity, but I realised pretty quickly that like being a strong woman was very much my identity of like being physically strong. And so I was like still going to the gym heaps, and I was like kind of smashing myself a bit, and I was like, why am I doing this? Like it's not actually that helpful for me in general life and for the sports and things I want to do to actually be like hammer throw strong, Olympic level strong anymore. Like I don't need that. Why are you doing it?
That's a huge shift from you thinking your identity, because I'm sure many athletes see themselves that way, or even no matter what your role is, some people are so attached to the job title.
Exactly.
Athlete, personal trainer, physio, whatever. But you, at what point did you realise, no, my identity is that I'm a strong woman?
Oh, I don't know. It was probably like, when I got transitioned away from high performance services to a new physio, and she's been such a gem. She's awesome, and she was kind of like, all right, like you've got a few imbalances from like spinning around in circles one way and doing something very specific for 20 years. If you want to start jogging, or if you want to play a sport that's a bit more symmetrical, you've got some stuff to work on. And I was like, shh. Like, no. Can't I just keep doing like Olympic lifts and like all the fun stuff? And she was like, no, here's some rehab that you need to do quite slowly and like drop the weights down. And like I really struggled with that because it just felt like you could see yourself going backwards. And so that took me a while to come to terms with. But no, she's been awesome at kind of pestering me to be like, just follow the plan, you know, it's just another plan and it has a goal and we'll get there. But like you do need to dial back the weights that you're lifting so you can relearn how to move properly in a few aspects of things. And so that was I've been very grateful to have her guidance.
So that would have been very humbling.
The 2023 was a very humbling year. Yeah, retired from sport, picked up a new job, picked up a new sport, like moved flats a bunch, and so it was just like I was prepared for it to be a year of learning, but it was extra humbling. So,
what's your biggest learning from 2023?
Oh, biggest learning. Yeah. Oh, probably don't say yes to everything would be one of them. It was and like I'm quite. I was really lucky through the last couple of years of my high performance career to be. They have I think they were called life advisors at one stage, but it's basically someone in high performance sport that helps athletes think about life after sport, whether that be study, whether that be what's your career path look like. And I got to work with a really awesome lady called Tina Manka, who I went to her and I said kind of love to do some values work about understanding who I am and who I want to be, because I know that's been really important for the last couple of years of my career, of my throwing career. And so we did a bunch of work around that, and part of that was like doing a week schedule and being like, all right, so what in this aligns with like your goals, like and your values, and once you've got everything in your week, when someone says, hey, do you want to go out for dinner, or hey, do you want to come to this party, you can look at your schedule and be like, oh well, that's like, this is what I'm giving up to put that in, to put this new thing in. And so thinking about saying yes to things in that way, thinking about what are you saying no to?
Yes,
be it sleep, be it, I was going to do that admin that would help me later on in life, or am I giving up family time to go and do this other random thing? So thinking about that stuff, even though I'd done a lot of that stuff already, like I was like, oh yeah, it doesn't really matter. Like I can be a bit more undisciplined with stuff, and I can be like, I can let a few things slide here and there, but that's just not how who I am as a person and how I operate. And so even though it was nice to have that freedom because I didn't have responsibilities of training like to my team and the people that were helping me, it was just kind of on me and my life. I was like, oh, that's actually not who I am as a person. So it was good to do for a little bit, but I was like, that's not how I roll. Like that doesn't make me happy and doesn't make me feel fulfilled. So had to think a bit more about what I was putting into my life, I think.
When you were seeing those mental health professionals, what surprised you about yourself when you were diving deep into it?
What surprised me about myself? I would say I'm probably already quite self-aware, but that doesn't mean that you act on those self-awareness things. And so I could explain exactly what was happening in my life or what was going wrong and why. But it takes someone to turn around and be like, well, it sounds like you know exactly what you need to do. Can you just go and do it?
And
you're like, I'm being a bit of an idiot, eh? I should just go and fix that thing. And like half the time it's just a little kick up the bum from someone, eh?
The power of accountability too.
Exactly.
I always get that.
Yeah, which is awesome, because as soon as somebody else says it to you, that you've, like, all high performance had paid for it on my behalf, but you were like paying someone to tell you this.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Like as soon as I've paid someone to tell me this, I'm like, well, I better go and do it, because otherwise I'm wasting my time, their time, and my money.
I was watching this reel the other day, and this lady was saying the fallacy of being self-sufficient, that you need people around you in order for you to self-develop. There is no self-development without the community that is around you.
Yeah, exactly. And like all those things about kind of sharing your goals with others and actually, like, people love nothing more than to hold someone accountable. Like, you tell someone you're on a diet, and they're like, oh, I thought you were on a diet. If you're like eating the donut, you know, that people love nothing more than doing that. So like, capitalize on that.
Yeah. What's something that the general public doesn't know about high performance athletes that you think they should know?
Oh, I think people, when they think high performance athlete, they think like the training is the hardest part. I think everyone, like most athletes, actually love the training. Like, it's, you get to be around just like top notch fizzers that are like, everyone is there that wants to be their best self, which is just like such an awesome environment to be in. But, well, for me at least, the worst part of being an athlete is all the admin around it, of like you just have to look after yourself in such a disciplined way in terms of like nutrition, recovery, sleep, physical recovery, like physio and stuff, and it's all that stuff that kind of takes up all the time. Like, you can't physically train for more than a certain number of hours unless you're maybe an endurance athlete, and that's the point. But for me, I probably wouldn't do more than 2 or 3 hours training a day, but there was so much other stuff to keep on top of, and so like I think you end up being like a project manager. And I always get asked about, like, for young athletes coming through the system, what would you tell them? And you're kind of presented with this massive amount of resource in terms of like nutritionists, sports psychology, all that stuff, and you've got to tell them what you need as opposed to the other way around. Because when you're young and coming through, you sit down and have a consult with a nutritionist, for example, and like, if you're young, you don't really know what to ask for or what you need, and so younger athletes end up kind of getting presented with a bunch of information and kind of thinking they have to go and act on all this stuff, and it's super overwhelming, and they're like, oh, I've been doing everything all wrong all the time. But it's the other way around. Like, you're the project manager of your team, and so like, and a lot of the more experienced high performance athletes will have their core team of like the S&C, a sports psychologist, a nutritionist, all that stuff, where they have a meeting with them like once a week, like 20 minutes or so, and just be like, how was training this week? What do you need from us? These are the goals, this is how we're tracking, and you're actually running it like a project, and a project manager would. So
Interesting. Yeah. I never saw it in that way. I thought that the athlete would, like, there would be a head coach doing the project managing, and then the athlete is pretty much the passenger in the whole thing.
Yeah, and I think that's what... Yeah, I think once the athlete kind of... Oh, and it can be different in team and individual sports, but I think in individual sports in particular, I think athletes do so much better when they're the project manager of their team. When it's coming from them, when it's their vision, their goal, and you kind of can come up with shared values with the people that are helping you. And it takes a while to find the right providers. Like, there's not the right one for everyone, especially in stuff like psychology. You've really got to gel with the person and kind of have the same operating models. But yeah, it can be such a powerful thing. And like, again, that's one of the things I miss the most, is like the people that I used to work with, and these people are getting paid to help me. But like, I'm still really close with heaps of them, just because they're awesome humans. And like, we were chasing the dream together. Like, it was something so epic to be chasing together. So there's lots of cool people out there.
Do you still have the competitive fire in you? Or do you feel like it's evolved into something else? Like, I know a lot of your friends would have got picked for the Olympics coming up in France, right? Yeah. When you saw that, were you like, oh?
Nah, not at all. I'm kind of like, I just know how stressful it is, like, getting to the start line healthy. Like, once you're there, you're all good. But like, my Olympics was the COVID Olympics, and so for me that was just like, don't get COVID, don't get COVID, don't get COVID. And it was just like, everything was so locked down and so controlled. So no, I'm just really stoked for them, because like, I know what it takes to get there, and I know how hard like some of them have missed Olympics in the past. Know what that feels like, and so yeah, just really chuffed for them, and like, still absolutely fizz watching it, because it's just cool to see like these mega athletes do crazy things with their bodies, but nah, I don't feel the need to be on that stage anymore. Right. I never really described myself as a competitive person. Like, I guess people confuse competitive and over competitive a lot. Like, I will like try my best, like try my absolute darndest to win something, but if I don't, I'm kind of like, oh well, should we go again? Like, but I'm not like, like flip the table kind of person. It's Whereas some athletes are like that, and that helps them sometimes. Like, just that real driven by rage. Like, that's what motivates some people, and that's fine, because it gets them a long way.
And probably maybe that connection with the identity, like you said, if your mindset was that you identify just as a strong woman, it's like, well, even if you didn't lose, like even if you didn't win, you're still living your values of being a strong woman. Like, you still went out there and did your best and like threw far and did really well. Whereas like if someone's identifying as like, I'm the best, or I need to be the best, or I'm a winner, and therefore if they're not winning, like they might come second or third and it's still not enough for them, because no, I identify as like, I need to be number one, or I need to be the best in my sport, maybe.
Yeah, I think that's a huge takeaway today, one of them anyway, is that like you got to pick an identity that is adaptable to everything.
Like sustainable over your whole life.
Yeah.
And it can change and evolve, obviously, but yeah. But
like something like that you can still do, like you said, then you could pick up rugby, that's still fulfilling that identity value, or even just going to the gym, or going to group fitness classes, whatever. You're still able to live that identity and that value of yours.
Julia, what is high impact athletes, and why is that important to you?
High Impact Athletes was founded by a Olympic tennis player from New Zealand called Marcus Daniel. Awesome dude, and he is an athlete that wanted to give back. And he's in a sport, in particular tennis, that has a lot of prize money sloshing around. So you're getting a lot of kind of high net worth athletes that are earning a bunch of cash. And he wanted to think about a way that he could give back in an effective way. And in terms of effective, that means like having a think about where your money goes and is it doing the most good that it can. Lots of awesome people in the world trying to do good things for the world, but not necessarily having equal impacts across like lives saved per dollar. And it's like there's a whole train of thought, effective altruism, which has got a bad rep recently because of some bad finance bros, but still the thought remains, you know, like if you want to do good in the world, you should seek to maximize it for the efforts that you're putting in. So high impact athletes basically helps align athletes that want to give back with causes that they value. So I think high impact athletes covers like poverty reduction, climate and the environment, and animal welfare. And so it's got a list of like the most effective charities in the world that it encourages, especially high net worth athletes, to donate a portion of their income, of their earnings. And so there's like the High Impact Athlete Pledge that you can take, which is I'm pledging to donate at least 2% of my income every year to effective charities. And you don't have to donate to the high impact athletes prescribed ones, but it's basically just encouraging athletes more broadly to think about, I have this massive platform of followers, I guess depending on how famous you are, but you know, athletes kind of have this platform for their physical pursuits, but people listen to what athletes say. Like people uphold the All Blacks, for example, as like these role models in society. And so it's kind of like using that platform to give back, to encourage others to do good, and also using their earnings, if they have high earnings, to do good. I didn't earn much from hammer throwing. There's not a lot of money in hammer throwing, but I do have a full-time job. And so I took the pledge, and I recently have been donating to the Anti-Malaria Foundation.
True, so you're donating income from your corporate job as an economist. Oh, wow.
Yeah, so that was just something that I thought that, you know, there was some stat about if you earn over a certain amount, which was kind of like, you know, a decent income in New Zealand, but one that many professionals in New Zealand might be at, you're in the top 1% of the world in terms of income and wealth. So I was kind of like, holy crap, like, that's a massive stat. Like, if I wanted to give 2% of my income, there's probably a few things like, you know, bought coffees or just a few kind of luxury things that I don't really need that I could cut back on if I was struggling to donate. And so that's kind of a challenge I gave myself, that I wanted to donate that money and make sure I was, you know, checking my privilege a bit and trying to give back to the world in some way. So
And how is High Impact Athletes different from other charities?
I think the main thing is like that effective component of it. So there's a bunch of smart people out there that have analysed kind of per dollar what impact you're having on the world, and it might be like amount of CO2 reduced in the atmosphere per dollar spent, or amount of animal lives saved or something from factory farming, depending on what you care about. And so that's probably bringing that rigorous impact analysis to the charities that they're encouraging people to donate to. A lot of people, and like again, it's if you donate to anywhere, like that's awesome, that's very cool, and yeah, but people tend to donate where there are causes that they've been impacted by. So if a family member's been sick but with something, like you might donate to the Cancer Foundation or things like that. So yeah, it's kind of just encouraging people to think about, if you care about all people equally, like what's the best way to donate your money to have that impact.
Is it just athletes that donate to that charity?
It encourages athletes, coaches, like referees, kind of anyone peripherally involved in sport too. Yeah. But like obviously athletes are I think Dave Nika at the moment has a campaign for his next fight coming up that he's pledged to donate $10 for every punch landed in his next fight.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's kind of encouraging other athletes to get on the train, even if they're not part of high impact athletes or just supporters of Dave, that want to give back and want to support what he's supporting. So it's just trying to have this big snowball effect, basically, of just encouraging athletes to A, think about what they care about in the world, and B, how could they use their platform to platform or income to give back.
How do you think the high performance sport community in New Zealand could be improved? If you had like a magical wand and they were like, Julia, your wish is our command, how would you improve the industry?
That's a very good question. Well, there's a few. At the moment, the topical issues are athlete wellness, and there's always a trade-off between performance. Like a measurable metric is how many gold medals did New Zealand win at the Olympics, as to how effective our sports funding and allocations are going. But the other side of that is at what cost to the athletes. Should we be pushing our athletes until they drop to achieve that? Is that a good model? Most people, especially athletes, would say no. I'd much rather live a happy and long life after I retire, as well as win a gold medal, as opposed to be in such a hole that you don't enjoy the rest of your life. So that's kind of a big part of, I don't know the answer, but I think there's been a big push to have athletes at the table for various things. So I'm involved in a couple of things. Athletics New Zealand has an athletes commission for the high performance athletes, where it's current and retired athletes who are kind of like, I'm going to mess this up because it's not the actual words, but it's kind of, we're advocating for and consulting with Athletics New Zealand to help make sure that the athlete voice is heard, to be a body for high performance athletes to come to if they feel like they're not being heard by Athletics New Zealand. So that's kind of one way athlete voice is being incorporated. There's been a bunch of different commissions like that pop up where they're kind of saying, look, you're making these huge strategic decisions about how sport in New Zealand is run. You haven't asked a single athlete. And it's going from we'll show you, we'll make the plan and show you, is that a good plan, or can you come and help us make the plan? So it's kind of shifting towards having athletes at the table making the plan, which is cool. And then also, I think rowing and cycling, I'm not completely across where this has got to, but trying to be recognised as, I think, employees of high performance sport, because currently athletes have no bargaining power for how they're paid, and there's not a huge amount of transparency. And so I think they won that case, and I think it's being appealed currently by high performance sports. So it's kind of, athletes want a bit more agency in how things are being planned, run, how resources are being allocated. Because it's like, it is a job at the end of the day. And there is currently funding for it, but it is, for the most part, probably not enough to live off.
Yeah.
Which, whether or not it should be, is probably like a government decision, I guess. Like, if you think athletes contribute to society in a way that they should be paid as a full-time job. A few of those things up in the air at the moment. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure where I'd land on that. Yeah.
One thing I got out of it is give Julia the magic wand. So if you're listening right now,
give me the wand. I'm not sure I want the wand. Like, it's a tough job, and
huge responsibility.
Yeah.
And I could assume that you feed some and some other people get pissed off.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's a win-lose.
Yeah. And especially as well because all sports would be somewhat different in what they need most, or
exactly.
in regards to their training. Like you said, some can get through with only training a couple hours a day, and therefore they might still be able to work a full-time job, and that's okay. Others might need to be training, like if they're endurance athletes and training hours and hours on a day to the point that it would interfere with having a normal full-time job, and therefore need to be getting paid more. And
Before we wrap up, Julia, I've got a couple more questions. The first one is if people want to find you and connect with you and high impact athletes, where could they find you?
Probably Instagram would be the best. Yep, my handle is J2TheRat. And high impact athletes, I'm pretty sure is just high impact athletes or HIA, one of the two. Yeah.
Last question: if you could talk to Julia, who just missed out 25 centimeters to qualifying for the Olympics in Rio.
Yep.
If you could talk to her, what would you tell her?
Ooh, good question. You will go to the Olympics next time around. It won't be easy, but nothing good ever is. But deal with it. Go and deal with that. You've failed at something. That's a sucky feeling. Go and deal with that. Don't just pretend it never happened.
Julia Ratcliffe, everybody.